In the constantly changing world of fundability, the big question is this: how are entrepreneurs and real estate investors like us, ones who want to grow our businesses and who are tired of paying for really expensive alternative lending, how do we tap into the most inexpensive money available and do it without the hassle of typical borrowing? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. Welcome to the Get Fundable podcast with your host, Merrill Chandler.
Welcome everybody, Merrill Chandler here. So today, I've been waiting for the right moment to be able to have this episode of the Get Fundable podcast. First of all, we're talking about freedom, right? And this is not the Braveheart freedom, and this is not the political or the democratic version of freedom. Freedom that I'm talking about is the freedom to masterfully create anything you want. Masterfully create anything you want. So let me kind of break it down this way. I have a saying that is that I love to use when I'm doing my personal development trainings, for people when in my deeper fundability classes, the masterminds, etc. And it goes like this: practice creates competence, creates confidence, creates mastery, creates freedom. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, back when I was 8 years old, my mom put me into piano lessons, right? And I was so excited to start piano lessons because I could see individuals who were out there who literally just got on the keyboard and were just playing and playing and playing and playing. After 3 years, I went to a conservatory. My mom and dad hooked it up. It wasn't just and nothing against piano teachers in the neighborhood. It was a conservatory, and I went and I literally did my lessons on a baby grand at this conservatory. And this woman was, and my teacher was hardcore and demanding and fastidious. I mean, 3 years I went to these piano lessons. My motivation for these piano lessons, 8 years old, well, who are we when we're 8 years old, right? My motivation was so that I could play like a master, right? I was just free to play anything I wanted. The problem is that it practice took discipline. And I have never been, as a younger man, I was the most spontaneous. I was the most out there. I was the most, even my gift for my gift for gab and talking to people and enrolling them into my life and into ideas. Even the dark consequences of going to prison because I was one way or another out of control, right? Well, the seeds of all of those personality traits were alive and kicking when I was 8 years old. And so for 3 years, it was like pulling teeth for my mom to get me to practice. Her and my dad, they neither one of them played the piano, but wanted musical children, right? And to this day, my sisters both play. My brother still has a musical bent, and me, I only play the stereo and the online services, right? I don't play, even though I still have a keyboard in my front room. I have a keyboard. So what's the point of this? Well, what I didn't know as an 8-year-old, and I didn't learn and for decades later, is that the process of how practice fits into mastery and freedom, right? So when I was practicing and I was doing those little keyboard exercises and I was doing my scales and I was doing all my things, I did not, and I was not taught at that age, but I did not make the connection that practice creates competence. So if I'm competent at a particular song, we would have recitals, right? You guys may have a similar background to mine. We have recitals to illustrate our competence given a certain level of lessons, right? But the thing I missed is that competence creates confidence. And confidence is that thing that every one of us, it's that juice that makes the squeeze worth it. The confidence to be able to go play a song was the feedback loop that would allow me to want to practice more at a whole new level, right? And we level up and level up and level up 3 years. And I was pretty good at 3 years. I was playing Fleur de Lis by the time I was 10 years old. You know, da 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 da, right? At 10 years old, I was playing Fleur de Lis at a recital. But I didn't, but the actual discipline of practicing and the lack of understanding, or just the lack of maturity, my way in the world, the lack of maturity is I could not make that loop. Practice creates competence, creates confidence, and the confidence is the feedback to take us to mastery, right? Where I can master a level of playing. And so now I'm going to wax a little philosophical here. So this process, it's got its analog. It relates to everything that we do. Somebody asked me a long time ago about freedom, and about the freedom to. I don't remember what the subject matter was. What I learned from it was more important than the subject. And I retorted, so are you free to play the piano? You love freedom. Are you free to play the piano? And his answer was no. And I said, the point, then how free are you? Because, and in previous episodes, guys, I've talked about, how many crayons are in our crayon box. Some of us work with 8, some of us work 16, 32, 64, 128 crayons in our box. But if I only have 8 crayons of the standard colors, am I free to color with seafoam green? No, that's in the 64 color box. I am not free to color with that color. I am not free to play the piano unless I've practiced, creates competence, creates confidence, creates mastery. Then I am free to play any song that I wish. So freedom, there's 2 versions of this. There's freedom to do something and freedom from something. And what I want this message today, this episode to focus on, is the ability to be free to do things, free to express ourselves, free to survive a recession, free to qualify for the next home, automobile, business line of credit. Because if we have not practiced to create competence, create confidence, to create mastery over fundability, we will not be free to enjoy the results of our labors. And just like me, when I'm 8 years old, do you realize what when I was 11 years old, I wanted to play the rock and roll tunes that I was listening to as a young man. I remember I was born in 61, and so I was right smack dab. I was listening to all the good burgeoning rock and roll movement at all levels, and I was in love with that music. And I wanted my fascination. I wanted to play on the piano, Smoke on the Water, right, by Deep Purple. I wanted to play Stairway to Heaven. And I wanted to play Dream On by Aerosmith, Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. I wanted to be able to play these things. And you could probably already guess, but so that I can impress the fair sex, right? So that I could be the man. But all I did was practice the songs, not the theories, not the I only practiced the 2 or 3 or 4 songs that I thought would be enough to wow somebody. Oh, I'm telling you, I was quite the creature as a younger man. So, if we want freedom, there is a path to freedom, because to be free to do something, we have to go through this process. To be free to paint, we've got to practice and create competence with the skills and the theory. And then those skills and theory turn into personal confidence, like, nailed it, right? We get positive feedback about what we're able to do. That confidence creates the loop where we can become masters, and then we are free to do any kind of art we wish. But that mastery doesn't come until we have dialed in the mechanics, dialed in the details, literally done the rote practice that is what drove me crazy in most of my life. Well, the thing about this, guys, is that when we translate it to the world of fundability, you can translate it to anything in the world. The problem is that we want the freedom too without paying the price of technical learning and technical expertise. So here's another example. I'm in the middle of a mastermind, right? It's a thing that we're doing where it's an 8-week program where clients get it as part of becoming a coaching program. You can subscribe to it without becoming a client, but it's designed to learn the principles of fundability and collect the data to make your personal and business fundable, right? It's collecting data, but it is a pain in the ass. It is so fastidious. The lenders are measuring data points, like infinitesimally small movements in our borrower behaviors, all these things. And if we don't go through the BS of collecting all of these little data points, we can never master fundability. And it's so interesting to watch me as an 8-year-old in my students and in the folks who are the masterminders, the boot campers, the funding hackers, to watch them run up against the wall of, this is so tedious. And I'm like, yes, it's tedious. And you got to ask yourself, is it worth it to be free to be fundable, to be free to take down any kind of credit line, any kind of business loan, any kind of a large, a big ticket purchase with the best rates, best terms, best everything, and do it even during a recession? You guys, unless we have a practice and become competent at what appear to be menial tasks, we will never create we'll never become masters of the funding game, and we will not be free to do the things that we say we want to do. Here's what's interesting. To this day, I can still play, I don't know, 2/3, 3/4 of Stairway to Heaven, because it was the thing that I kept practicing and practicing and practicing. And so my muscle memory is still 50 years later, still remembers that song, even if I go years without playing it. Because we will never forget, if we have practiced and created the competence and created the confidence, we will master Stairway to Heaven. We will master revolving account fundability. We will master what it takes to thrive in the middle of a personal financial distress or global financial distress. Because you don't lose your mastery. Mastery means mastery. Now, would I play better if I practiced Stairway to Heaven right now? Yeah. But it's so funny when I see a piano in a room, or I've gone to events. We've done real estate events or whatever, and some wedding had been in one of the rooms prior to the real estate conference being set up, or whatever. And there's a piano there. I'll sit down at that piano and I'll just start tinkling with the ivories. So my question here is, whether you paint, play the piano, whether a mechanic, fixing cars, creating designs for clothing, there is the period of technical discipline to master the principles. Now, the last thing that I want to kind of to cover or review as part of this subject matter is, how many you've seen movies, maybe you've experienced it yourself, where somebody is listening to somebody play the piano and it is technically perfect, but it is not artfully expressive, where they flawlessly execute the song, but they can't improvise. So guys, mastery means we can improvise. I always envied the people. I had a friend in high school where, I had my 3 or 4 songs I could play, and he would get on, he could play by ear. I was technical. I couldn't play by ear. And he would sit down, and my exact same age, hadn't taken a freaking lesson in his life, and by ear he could literally improvise. So the thing is that while he was free to improvise music, he also couldn't read any sheet music. He would have to listen. His limitations, remember how we talk about, for every new freedom there's a new limitation, right? They come in pairs. He couldn't read music to get down a piece that he desired to play. So he would listen to it, and then he would do his estimation of it. But as you and I both know, if you're a music fan or anything, driving a stock car, there is mastery comes from practice. And so he envied me that I could technically play certain songs, and I envied him that he could riff like a madman on these songs, on many songs. But the thing is there's limitations and freedoms to both. So when it comes to your life, this isn't just fundability. I bring in fundability because that's why you're here. You want the juice, as much juice as you possibly can. That's why you binge these podcasts. But the life lesson here is that whatever we're doing, we got to practice, because only when we become technically capable can we master a song or an instrument or a wealth strategy. And then we are free to literally create it. We have the entire 128 crayon box, and we can do nigh anything with that 128 crayons. The texture and the tones and the colors that are available to us when we have when we're free to use 128 colors, because we've practiced shading and the black and white charcoal, and we know the technicality of art and form and shadow and dimension and perspective. Those are learned by most of us through practice. Well, funny thing is, I'll wrap up with this. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, some of the greats in Western European Renaissance, we look at their art and they have it all down. But did you realize each one of those guys, they were apprentices? They actually devoted their lives. They apprenticed. They worked for room and board so that they could learn the technical details of the masters. And then there were some guys who faded into some of their students faded into oblivion. Raphael, another amazing Renaissance, totally was apprenticed and studied at the feet of Michelangelo. So you have to learn you got to learn the details. You got to practice. You got to find out what your reporting date is, and then practice paying down to your perfect percentage at the day before the reporting date, and then to zero on the due date. And you got to practice and practice and practice, and then we get rewarded when we become competent because of practice, but we get rewarded when we see our fundability, our scores continue to drive higher and higher, and our confidence increases, and then we become fundability masters. Remember, in my book, if you haven't read my book, I literally talk about the point of that mastery. We want to master the funding game. And every single, to use the sports analogy that I use in the new F word, every basketballer out there has practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. But then you can tell how non-sports guy I am, but you get the Michael Jordans, right? And you get all of the Kobe Bryants, bless his soul. You get these masters of the game. They are free to do anything on that court and play it masterfully. Absolutely free, because they know that every single nuance of the rules of that game. And they practiced and practiced and practiced. So you and I, everybody, anybody who's associated with anything, this is the process. This is one of my success principles. This is the rules of the game. Practice creates competence. You got to become competent at it. When you're competent at it, you get rewarded for it. Your confidence grows up, and as you master, as your confidence goes, and you practice even more, and you continue that loop, the confidence creates mastery, and mastery creates freedom. I encourage you to, whatever it takes, raising your children, partnering in your business, whatever, living your life and practicing the piano, whatever you do, take home the fact that practicing is a high yield endeavor. We just need to remember that it goes all the way to the end, to mastery, and finally to freedom. This is Merrill Chandler, your host of the Get Fundable podcast, and I continue to practice because I want to be free to share in every possible way with tens of millions of people the value of this process towards making themselves fundable. You guys have a blessed morning, afternoon, or evening. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Get Fundable podcast. Please leave comments because Merrill would love to read about your aha moments from this episode. And be sure to visit getfundable.com to read our blog, get important links, join our community, and much, much more, like ordering Merrill's tell-all book that is changing the world, The New F Word. And you got to tell your friends about this podcast because we want them to get fundable too.